3/4 of the way down the waning gibbous moon. So new moon will be here in about 10 or 11 days. So hope you enjoyed the full moon. I always get a good laugh out of the various names that you see in the media. The strawberry moon, I believe they called it. And I saw lots of pictures of red moons as if that's a thing that actually happens. I remember before I even got into astronomy having quite a laugh when I decided to jump into Photoshop one day and make about 40 different named moons that all had various colors and shades. I remember making the Pride Moon. I made Poop Moon and Poop Moon 2. Those are both brown. The Pride Moon was, of course, rainbow colored. I made quite a few different moons. So that was quite the exercise. So anyway, I'm your host, Rue, and thank you for joining us this week on the Astrocast. We are pretty much officially in the Milky Way season. I don't know if you notice, but when you go outside now and it's dark and you look east, you can pretty much see the summer triangle coming up right off the bat. So anytime you can see Cygnus approaching overhead, you know that summertime is finally here. So I hope you're enjoying it. I know I have been. I've been starting to get out a little bit more often after not doing quite as much for a little while in anticipation of the dark sky trip that has come and gone at this point. And I'm already thinking about what my next one is going to be. I'm actually thinking I might do Cherry Springs Star Party next year because it looks really amazing. And I'd love to go to the Okie-Tex Star Party one day. But that one being far out west is, I'm not going to say it's unattainable. Obviously, I can make it out west. I could buy a flight, yada, yada. But heck of a lot easier to do something on my coast, kind of in my neck of the woods, to dip my toes into a week-long star party. So I often wonder if people stay the whole week when they go to these parties or if they just go for a few nights. I guess it probably varies. Some people will probably stay the whole week. Some people probably just go for one night. But I think if I was going to go, I'd probably want to go for at least 3 nights and maybe try to do the whole week. I don't know. Just my little dark sky trip that I took for 3 nights was quite the endurance test. Sleeping as much as you can during the daylight hours and then staying up until sunrise every night. As I approach the big 4-0, that becomes quite difficult to do. I am quickly realizing that I'm not 17 anymore, and staying up until sunrise is not super easy. Though when your brain is very interested in what you're doing and you're seeing the incredible sights that we are lucky enough to get to see on a nightly basis, it's a lot easier to stay engaged. So I don't know if you feel the same way, but I know I certainly do anytime that I'm under the stars, particularly a really dark sky. So actually, Saturday, I went and did a photo shoot on Saturday morning. I've got a good friend who's a friend of the show. Her name is Debbie Foster, and she actually does a podcast called The Backyard Naturalist. She does it with her friend Lori, and they've been doing it for several years now. And it's a very good podcast. If you're interested in wildlife or nature, I would highly recommend giving it a search. Again, it's called The Backyard Naturalist. And I did the photo shoot for them because I actually did it last year too. They just like me to, get shots of let me back up a little bit. They do a live episode once a year on site at one of the local farmers markets here, and they invite lots of the vendors in to talk to them about, what they're doing, how it affects the wildlife, local produce, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll usually have a specialist or two come on. I know I've often enjoyed many of the guests that they have on their show on a regular basis, but while they are doing that live show, they like to have a photographer on site just to get photos of all the various guests that attend so they can, share them with their social media and on the podcast art, et cetera. And I did that for the second time last Saturday. I did it the year before, and then obviously I did it this year as well. And Debbie was actually kind enough to have me briefly on the episode, and we talked very briefly about dark skies and why they're so important. And I suppose she's interested enough in the topic that she has invited me to be a guest on the show for a full episode. So that will be coming out in the near future. I'm actually going down to the studio tomorrow evening to record that episode. She sent me the layout for the questions and all that kind of good stuff. So if you want to check that out, I'll be sure when it comes out to drop a link to it, obviously, so you guys can give that a listen. And like I say, if nature and wildlife is an interest of yours, and I would imagine for a lot of you that it is, I find most people that are, big into astronomy generally have a large sense of nature and how important it is. So if that's something that you want to check out, definitely check them out. Again, that podcast is called The Backyard Naturalist. And briefly before we get into today's topic, I wanted to tell you guys about something that happened to me. Because, I talk often about buying from reputable dealers on the show. And, I oftentimes mention places like, Adorama, Gina Astro, High Point Scientific, First Light Optics. These are all excellent websites and vendors that sell astronomy gear. And as is often the case, we don't always practice what we preach. So not too long ago, I was in the market for my first RFL lens. So for those of you who may not know, L lenses are Canon's professional line of camera lenses, and I was looking to get my first one. I have a lot of lenses, but none of them are the L series lenses, and I've always wanted one. So I decided to start looking around, and I had my eye on the 24-70 because, to get started with the Holy Trinity of lenses. If you don't know, the Holy Trinity is 3 lenses. They can be from any manufacturer really, but they cover the most useful focal lengths from 14 to 24 millimeters being your first, 24 to 70 millimeters being your second, and then 70 to 200 being your telephoto or third lens in the Holy Trinity of lenses, if you've ever heard anyone use that term. So 24 to 70 was kind of the best one for me to get started with because I figured I could use it for a lot of astrophotography, and I could also use it for portraits, which is something that I'm looking to get into in my photography business as well. So I had my eyes open, and I very quickly saw how very, very expensive they are. They retail for, I think, close to $2,200 new. So I started hunting around, and I was on eBay one day. Let me tell you, don't make my mistake. I'm going to tell you what happened. Don't be me. Don't be like Rue. And I was looking at, various used lenses on there, and I saw lots that were, good quality, a whole lot from Japan. I noticed and they specifically mark them as Japanese lenses. I know that, I've watched enough YouTube people who live in Japan and go to Japan to know that Japanese people take very, very good care of their equipment, generally speaking. So maybe that's why they advertise it that way. I'm not really sure, but a lot of those were very reasonably priced, all things considered, $1,800, $1,900 in that range. But I stumbled across one version of this lens, and it was $250. And I thought to myself, there's no way this is real. And, I assumed that this was probably not an actual lens. However, and this is my entire defense as to why I did this, eBay offers a money-back guarantee, as I'm sure you're all aware. They very proudly post about their money-back guarantee on their website. And I said to myself, I've been using eBay for years. I'm actually a seller on eBay. I don't sell too much these days, but I have sold quite a bit with them in the past. And I just thought, what's the risk? I said, best case scenario, maybe this is somebody who doesn't really know what they have and they're just looking to make some money. So they put up a lens that, they don't know what they got. And, I'll get an amazing lens at an amazing price. And worst case scenario, it's some scammer who's trying to, prey on the stupid like me. And I'll just use the money back guarantee. No harm, right? So I made sure to put it on a credit card because I figured, if you don't get an item, you can call your credit card, dispute it, etc. But I figured I wouldn't even have to do that since eBay has their money back guarantee. I'm not going to get into all of the details of how this all unfolded, But let me just tell you that when eBay says they have a money back guarantee, they do not mean it. I had all the proof in the world up to and including a letter from UPS stating that the tracking number that the seller had provided was delivered to a completely different address that was not mine. And eBay still wouldn't refund my money. It was absolutely crazy. I was going back and forth, back and forth. I had one person early on tell me that they would definitely refund the money, but we had to wait until 5 days passed because of they got to give the seller a chance to respond. And then they reneged on that. And I was so furious because I had all the proof that this person was an obvious scammer and they just wouldn't take it no matter what. I mean, I tried everything. You can't get a real person on the phone, and I'm, very good at tracking down real phone numbers, but no matter what you do, you can't get an actual person on the phone. The only way you can actually talk to somebody is through their Facebook chat of all places. But those people can't actually issue refunds. So there's nothing that they could do for me either. I ended up emailing after probably a dozen communications, and I'm talking obnoxious communications, when I had already told them, here's the letter from UPS stating it was delivered to another address, they would respond with, ask your roommate if they maybe took the package. And at one point they even said, check what might be a hiding place to your delivery person around your house. So at that point, I figured they were just messing with me. So I emailed the CEO of the company. I actually found his email because, people do that all the time and it works. And long story short, a couple days later, I finally heard back from one of his underlings, and he kind of apologized. At this point, I had already opened a dispute with my credit card. So I guess that was his way out. He said, I can't refund the money while the dispute's open with your credit card because we can't, get you double your money back or whatever nonsense. And I'm not willing to cancel the dispute with my credit card company at this point, because if I cancel it, then I'm, completely out of luck. If eBay says, screw you, good luck. So yeah, complete nightmare situation. Took up probably 3 weeks of my life. Don't do it. If you see a deal that looks too good to be true on that site, do not do it. I can tell you for myself personally, I'm never buying anything else again on eBay. I'm just not, because if you don't get the item, you're not getting your money back. And I'm telling you this was a pretty expensive item, $250. And most people probably spend $20, $30 on eBay. And when they never get their item and try to get their money back, they probably just give up because, if it's $20, I'm not going to, email eBay 15 times trying to get my money back. But for, $250, you're damn right I'm going to email them 15 times to get my money back. But yeah, I learned a valuable lesson. Just because you see money back guarantee does not mean that you are going to get your money back. And yeah, so I unfortunately cannot recommend eBay as a place to buy anything for an astronomer, parts or otherwise. Normally I could say go buy, connectors, screws, those types of small, bits and pieces that we need in astronomy at eBay. I really can't endorse them anymore after that nightmare scenario. I still haven't gotten my money back. I'm still waiting to hear back from the credit card company. And yeah, eBay, complete nightmare. Their money back guarantee is a complete joke. Please don't ever shop there again unless you absolutely have to, because I would just hate for one of you guys to have to go through something like I did. So anyway, enough about that nonsense. In other cool news, I was watching nebula photos the other day on YouTube, one of my favorite astrophotography YouTubers, and I was really surprised to see our friends over at Dark Dragons Astro actually made somewhat of a brief cameo on his channel. If you look up the video that he put up recently where he's going through Michelle Bayless's Snake Mountain Observatory, it's in his Observatory Tours series, which I'm a big fan of because every time I watch one of those videos, it helps me plan for what I'm going to do when I build out my observatory over the next year. And she actually saw them up at NEAF, the astronomical forum that's held up in the Northeast every year, and was able to use them for the roll-off roof observatory, which was awesome. So they actually briefly showed the Dark Dragons interface for the roll-off roof observatory on the Nebula Photos channel, which was super cool to see. So I obviously sent them a message and said, man, did you guys see your old Nebula photos? You got to go check this out. So big shout out to you, Nico. Hope you get to come on the show one day and do an interview with us, and keep up the great work, man. I saw you hit 200,000 subs over the weekend. I was able to jump on your live stream for a little bit, and definitely enjoyed seeing you get to that milestone. It's funny though, 200,000 is, obviously a whole lot of followers, but it does make you realize how much of a niche hobby this is, because, so many popular YouTubers, it's not uncommon for them to have 1 million, 2 million, even 5 million followers, if you're really popular in a particular hobby or segment. I would consider Nico to be, probably one of the most popular, up there with Astro Backyard and Queeve, the Lazy Geek, that kind of level of astronomy YouTuber. So yeah, it just kind of shows you how small our world is. And it does make me wonder how big this show will ultimately grow. It has been, consistently growing since day one, and we've got a very dedicated base of loyal listeners that I know tune in every single week, which I am very thankful to you guys for tuning in. But I do sometimes wonder, will I get to 100,000 listeners one day? I don't know. Right now, I'm not ashamed to tell you guys at all. We usually get around 1,000 to 1,500 listeners per month as of right now, which I think is really good considering the show's been on for, I guess, about 6 months now, and I have put $0 into advertising anywhere. I could probably do a better job of spreading the word on social media. I just get so exhausted on social media. I have a hard time making little videos, and for a while there I was doing trailers every week for each episode, but I wasn't really seeing a bump in listeners, so kind of why bother? Then again, if you don't try, you'll never have your viral moment. So perhaps I should put a little bit more thought into that. But what I have been thinking about is video episodes for the Astrocast. So I've got that in my back pocket, and I'm kind of starting to plan the set for the studio to start doing video episodes, which I think will be really cool, because there is a lot of stuff that I would like to be able to, give a visual diagram of when I'm talking about it. Obviously, the audio podcast is never going anywhere. That's kind of my bread and butter. That's what I love to do. But it would be cool to also have a visual part for those who would like to go on YouTube and watch as well. And I know that we would get a lot more listeners that way, because YouTube is just such a popular platform for all hobbies. All right, so enough about all that. Let's get into this week's topic. So with it being Milky Way season officially, I thought it might be fun to go over some of the lesser known targets. And I'll probably cover some of the more, obvious targets as well, just because what is obvious to me might not be obvious to you, and so on and so forth. And I also wanted to talk about some different ways to use Stellarium that I wasn't using up until recently, that actually will turn you on to a whole lot of new nebula and dark nebula, galactic nebula, etc. So if that's something that you're interested in, you will definitely be interested in this. So first of all, in Stellarium, by default, when you open it up, you're going to have access to, what they call the deep sky objects. And that's great for the more common nebulae are all going to be there. Your Orion Nebula, your Elephant's Trunk, the Lagoon Nebula, stuff like that is all going to show up, no problem. But if you want to open up a whole other world of nebula within Stellarium, then you want to enable a couple of other features that might not be readily obvious. And the first two that come to mind are the HIPS survey and the DSS survey, or Deep Sky survey. And if you turn these two features on within Stellarium, and then you go and check a few extra catalogs in the Deep Sky objects settings area, what you will notice is that a whole lot of new nebula that were not previously visible in Stellarium now become visible. So, for example, if you've ever went to look for something in the Sharpless catalog and you are able to locate it, but you can't actually see the nebula, if you turn on, HIPS and DSS, I've noticed, for example, like the Flying Bat and Squid Nebula. That's a one that's gaining popularity. The catalog numbers are SH2-129 and OU4. Those two, actually, you can search for them with the default settings in Stellarium and it will locate them. But then when you actually zoom in on the target, you won't see anything except the bright stars that are in that area. And that isn't going to let you actually, visualize what that nebula is, how big it is, and those sorts of things. So that's what we're going to talk about exactly how to do. All right. So if you don't have Stellarium, you can go and download that first at stellarium.org, or just go to Google and do a search for Stellarium and install it. I would imagine most of you probably have it, but if you don't, please download and install it. It's available on PC and Mac, and it's just a phenomenal tool. It's the best planetarium software, in my opinion, by far. It's free. You can use it to connect to your telescope. In fact, when I was getting started and before I had an ASI Air, I loved loading up Stellarium on my laptop and then using its go-to functionality so I could, literally locate whatever I was looking at in Stellarium and then have my telescope slew directly to that object, and it'll actually show you within Stellarium where your telescope is pointing as well. So, if you have an observatory type setup, that's an excellent way to connect a planetarium directly to your observatory for being able to visualize. So after you get Stellarium installed and set up, you're going to want to move your mouse to the left-hand bottom lower left side, and you'll see a lot of different options pop out from the left there. And you want to open up the configuration window. You'll see a few things pop up, but if you go over to extras on the right-hand side, go ahead and click on Nebula Background, DSS Survey, and HIPS Survey. So those should be in the third list. And if you see anything else in there that you'd like to download, you can go ahead and do that as well. And after you have clicked on those, we are going to go back out to the main area of Stellarium. And again, move your mouse over to the lower left and you'll find Sky and Viewing Options, or you can just press F4. And then you want to click on the DSO tab for Deep Space Objects. And then from within here, you're going to want to check any catalogs that you don't have checked already, like Sharpless 2, SH2. And then I went ahead and enabled a few of the other catalogs that include, HA emission nebula, dark nebula, etc. So you'll see the various letters that are associated with them. I think I've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 checked all together right now. And then after you have all those checked, you want to, at the bottom of your screen, move your mouse down and you will notice that you've got a couple new buttons. You've got one for Deep Sky Objects Background Images. If you click on that, you will notice a lot of new images come into view whenever you look for a particular area. You can also enable the HIPS survey, which is wonderful, and then also the digitized sky survey. So play around with those, have a look at them. For example, when I turn on the digitized sky survey, I can actually then see the aforementioned Flying Bat Nebula and the Squid Nebula around it. I only mentioned that one because I feel like I've been seeing a lot more photographs of it. So it's definitely having a moment in the astronomers community right now. It's in the northeast sky. I believe it's in the Cepheus region. And, that'll be visible in the northern hemisphere just shortly after dark, slightly lower than Polaris, but it gets higher and you have, a few hours to image it every night this time of year. So another thing that's coming up into the sky right now, kind of later on in the evenings, is Andromeda. It's starting to show up again. So everybody always loves to shoot Andromeda, regardless of the focal length that you're at. I know I'm certainly no stranger to Andromeda. I've probably put more hours in on that. I would say it's probably between Andromeda and Orion where I probably spent the most time imaging overall, but definitely a really cool object to image and one of the easiest to image too, because it's just so darn bright. I was able to see it naked eye when I was on my dark sky trip a couple weeks ago, and that was just incredible. So other nebula that are really popular right now, there's one in particular that I wanted to shoot so bad when I was on my trip, and I didn't get the chance to. Unfortunately, it was just too low on the horizon. But if you have a low, and I mean low as in like flat southern horizon, you may be able to get it. I think about 15 degrees is as high as it gets this time of year for me here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And, Charlotte's probably about halfway up the North American, or not North American, the USA, if you will, about halfway up. So if you're, further south, perhaps you can get a little bit of a better view if you're down in Florida, say, or even Cuba, Jamaica, etc. For, southern hemisphere folks, probably a lot easier to get at, obviously, but for us northern folks, not so much. And that would be the galaxy Centaurus A. It's visible for about 2 hours just after sunset right now before it disappears below the horizon. But you would want to get at it, probably before true astronomical darkness sets in. Your best chance is going to be, right after sunset. That's when it's going to be at its highest because it's just getting lower and lower as the minutes move on. But if you can get a photo of that, even if you don't have a super long focal length, for example, if I was using my 80 millimeter scope in my new ASI 585, since it has such a cropped in sensor, it gives me a more zoomed in view, even at, 440 something millimeters. And I could get quite an impressive image of it if I were able to have that low southern horizon that is required. So maybe if you're like up on a mountain or something and you can, look to the south, that would be ideal. So definitely check that out if you get a chance to. Two others, I know I mentioned them last week because there are two that I took photos of, but this is the perfect time of year to get them. The Rho Nebula is obviously just there for the taking right now. You really want to have dark skies for both Rho and the other nebula that I'm going to mention, which is the Blue Horsehead. They're both right in the same area of the night sky, in Scorpio. So if you look south, just after sundown, Scorpio is already coming out early in the evening to where you don't have to stay up super late to get it. But you will want dark skies. I would think Bortle 5 at a minimum. And if you can get, between 1 and 4, even better. Rho is a, relatively bright object, all things considered, but it does have those really faint blue oxygen areas within it. And that's really important to pick up, as well as the dark nebula that is within Rho, those beautiful tendrils that come out that kind of remind me of a squid whenever I see it. And in order to really make those pop, you're either going to need a lot of integration time or very dark skies. So the darker, the better, as always. But, I know not all of us have access to truly dark skies. I know I don't have real access to true dark skies, but, do the best you can. If you've got a dark area that you can travel to and put 4 or 5 hours on Rho, this would be a great time of year to do it. If you've got another rig that you can point at the Blue Horsehead Nebula, that one is much fainter, all things considered, because it's basically nothing but a reflection nebula. It's all blue. So you're not going to want to use really any filters on this other than a UV IR cut filter. If you have to use one of those to, sharpen up your stars and that sort of thing, check with your camera. It may already have a built-in UV IR cut filter. A lot of them do. And a lot of the astronomy cameras do not, because they like to give us the option of using whatever filter we want, but some do. So check your manufacturer's notes to see if you have one. But again, UV IR cut filter is probably only filter I would recommend, honestly, for both RHO and the Blue Horsehead. So Blue Horsehead you can actually get at several different focal lengths, but I'll say probably my favorite focal length for this that's common and easy to get is a 135. So if you have a Rokinon 135 lens, for example, this is an excellent target for that because it's a really fast lens, compared to your typical telescopes that are in the 5 to 7 range. If you can gather light at, f 2.8, you're going to be able to get it so much faster than you would with a full size telescope that's f5.6 or, even slower. And 135 really gives it a excellent framing angle. So you can, frame it just how you want. I was a little ticked off with myself because I didn't frame up the Blue Horsehead perfectly. In my defense, there were clouds coming in and I was having to kind of hop back and forth between targets. And I have the EAF installed on my 135. So it's not very not very easy to rotate that lens in the field. You've got to unscrew some screws and twist things around, et cetera, et cetera. And since I was moving back and forth between targets due to clouds, I wasn't willing to do that, but I still was able to capture the entire nebula. So it just wasn't perfect framing, but I'm okay with that. But yeah, Blue Horsehead Nebula and Ophiuchus. That whole region is absolutely beautiful to shoot. In fact, if you do have really dark skies and you want to get like a 50 millimeter lens out, if you've got, let's say you have a Canon camera or a Nikon camera and you've got a 50 millimeter 1.8 lens, that would be an excellent focal length to shoot RHO and the Blue Horsehead at the same time. You can look up on various websites that, have hosted photos. I'm sorry, it's escaping me right now. Sorry, that's Astrobin. We talked about that on the show a couple weeks ago. But yeah, Astrobin will show you a lot of great examples of RHO and the Blue Horsehead at 50 millimeter because that is a pretty popular target on that site at that focal length. So not far to the left, if you, I guess you're heading east, in the sky, you have obviously the Lagoon and Trifid Nebula, and it's the perfect time of year to get those two as well. Now, those are very bright and they're high enough in the sky this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere that most people should be able to get them unless you have like really tall trees in your backyard like I do. But luckily, I can just move down to the end of my driveway and that horizon drops low enough to where I am able to get the Lagoon and Trifid. But they are up high enough and they're bright enough to where you can definitely pick them up without having to do, crazy amounts of integration time. I actually put my 135 on them the other night and I was kind of shocked with just 3-minute subs. I was getting really good data coming in. The full moon was actually out. So I was like, let me try that L Extreme. And I knew that it was going to look weird on something like the Lagoon Nebula because it's not really a dual narrowband target because you have all that, blue in the Trifid Nebula, obviously. And it indeed did look pretty weird, but I still was able to pick up like a ton of data in just 3 minutes, which is a lot of fun. So definitely check that out. Another cool one right in that area that's part of the Sharpless catalog is SH2-29. And that's just to the left of the Lagoon and Trifid. And it's often a kind of an overlooked area that'll show up as faint nebulosity if you don't do a lot of integration time on your photos. But if you were to focus on that area, there's actually some really cool dark nebula in that region. And it's actually sometimes referred to as the Chinese Dragon Nebula because of the shape of that dark nebula. It curls back and forth like your Chinese dragon would. And that's actually an awesome target. So you can definitely get it at shorter focal lengths, 400 to 800, but it's really going to pop if you can get longer focal lengths, like 1,000 or more. I actually saw I think it was like 2,800. I think it was a Ritchie Crichton telescope that somebody had shot it on. And they had, I think, like I say, 2,800 millimeter focal length. And that was just an incredible shot. So, but I'll still say, regardless, if you have a, shorter focal length for wide field or a longer focal length, that's definitely a region worth checking out because that dark nebula looks so freaking cool whenever you can get it to really come out. So definitely check that one out. If you're at a wider focal length like I am, you could even work on the Lagoon and Trifid while you're at it, and then just gather enough data to where you can really get that dark nebulosity to come out. So instead of, doing just 2 hours on it, try to do a couple of nights on it. That's one thing I'm challenging myself to over the summer is to slow down and get more integration time, because I've said this before, but when you're new to astrophotography, we all have a tendency to want to target hop because we just want to kind of see what we can get and see all this amazing stuff in the sky. And that's perfectly fine. If that's what you want to do and that entertains you, go for it. God knows I've been very entertained by doing that in the past, but now I'm at the point where I'm trying to get really high quality photos. And in order to do that, you need to get, a lot of integration time. Now, I am not one of those people who does like 40 hours or more on one target. That's not me. Maybe I'll get that way one day whenever I have a permanent observatory and I'm able to take advantage of, all the nighttime hours. But right now, I want to be able to get at least 1 or 2 photos a night. So, 2 to 4 hours is typical for me if I'm in a, very dark sky. But if I'm at home and I'm imaging, then, 1 or 2 nights is not going to be uncommon to spend on one target because I need to be able to get, 12 to 16 hours worth of data to get a really pretty picture from Bortle 7 skies. So it's all about that integration time. Denoising tools are phenomenal, but there's no substitute for integration time and dark skies. So if you don't have both, just get more of the other. You know what I mean? So if you don't have time to, spend 4 nights imaging the same target, see if you can go to a darker sky. If you can't go to a darker sky, spend more time imaging one target. And your end result will just speak volumes to how much importance there is to be put on, more integration time. So anyway, I'm done rambling about that. You guys know I don't need to tell you, put more focal time into your targets this summer and your pictures will be much prettier. I promise you that. So I'm looking over this dark sky survey here in Stellarium, or digitized sky survey, I'm sorry. And it's kind of blowing my mind how much stuff shows up on the screen that did not show up before, and just how much more you get in terms of turning those other catalogs on, particularly like the dark nebula catalogs. My goodness, if you're ever short on targets, just turn that on and I guarantee you'll find a lot. Another cool target that is in that same region, a little bit lower than your Lagoon and Trifid, but not terribly lower, is going to be the Cat's Paw Nebula. This one, I'm surprised you don't see more photos of it. I know it's kind of low on the horizon, but it's not super duper low. You can get, let me see here what I'm looking here. It's at 20 degrees here. And I'm trying to see where it transits. Looks like it transits around 21 degrees right now from Charlotte. So, definitely something you could attain. And it's a really unique nebula because it literally looks like a cat's paw. So you don't need a whole lot of time on it to get a good signal because it is a fairly bright nebula. But yeah, the NGC 6334, or in the Sharpless catalog, it's number 8, so SH2-8. And that one is just one of my favorites. I actually remember the first time I took a dark sky trip, that was one of the first targets that I ever went after, was the Cat's Paw Nebula. So just looks like the the three beans of a cat. I used to have cats, so I definitely know what beans are. And then right above that, you have the Lobster Nebula, which is shaped just like a lobster. So that one's really cool as well. That's SH2-11, another one of those beautiful Sharpless catalog items. They're actually also part of NGC. Both of those are, but the point still remains that, if you're getting bored with, seeing the same, North American nebula, the Eagle Nebula, etc., using the Sharpless catalog will open up a whole new world to you as far as, different items are concerned for you to image. And I am literally just now, as I'm kind of scrolling through this, realizing how many dark nebula there are in the core Milky Way area that I was unaware of. And I follow a lady on Instagram who does pretty much nothing but dark nebula, and I'll have to look up her her @ name in a little bit here so I can mention that. But I always wondered, like, how does she find all these dark nebula? And I think I know now by using Stellarium. So that's definitely something that you can do as well. Making your way up higher into the Milky Way, obviously, we've got a lot of amazing targets around the Cygnus region. So at the bottom of Cygnus, right between Altair and Deneb, sits the very, very, very famous Eastern and Western Veil nebulas. These are two extremely popular targets that kind of become one depending on your focal length. It's another one of those targets that's excellent to shoot at 135 millimeters if you have like a Rokinon lens. I do find it's more interesting, though, to frame up these individually. So if you have a scope that's in that 400 to 500 millimeter range, something like that is going to look incredible with the Eastern Veil Nebula. And if you can frame it up in a portrait frame, that one almost looks like a face. That's kind of what I always picture. It looks like a creepy alien face that's smiling at you in portrait. That's something that frames up perfectly with our wide field scopes. Whereas the Western Veil Nebula it's so cool. I don't know what it reminds me of. It's almost like the head of a bird, or maybe like one of those pestilence masks. What do they call them? Plague mask. Yeah, that's kind of what it reminds me of, because it looks like one of those long noses that are kind of poking out. But that's obviously a couple of very beautiful targets. And again, this is one that you don't have to spend a ton of time on to get a really pretty picture. But if you take more time and do put 8 hours into it or more, you're going to be able to reveal a lot more of the detail and those beautiful tendrils, and get more of the color to come out, etc. So highly recommend spending a couple of nights on the Veil Nebula if you're in that region. Finally, above that, obviously, we have the whole Cygnus region that sits between the Summer Triangle. So we've got so many targets in here. You've got the Wall in Cygnus, the Northern Cross. You've got the Crescent Nebula, obviously, the North American Nebula. This whole region's just incredible, and I think it might be kind of my favorite part of the summer night sky, if I'm being honest with myself, because I usually spend the most time there. It's also one of the most incredible things to see from a dark sky, because the North American Nebula, if you're in a dark enough area, you can actually see it with the naked eye, and that's pretty crazy once you kind of realize the scale of it and see how big it is. It is very possible to see, and especially if you have binoculars, it just pops right out at you from a really, really dark location. And this is another one that just works amazingly well at different focal lengths. So there's so many targets within this region that you can get really close on. So if you've got 400 to 600 millimeter range, wide field nebula scope, if you will, something like the Crescent Nebula just looks amazing. But if you want to go super wide at 135 millimeters, like the Rokinon I've always talked about, the whole region looks incredible. So you can kind of just, put the Crescent somewhere within your frame and then image for 3 or 4 hours, and it'll make your jaw drop. As a bonus, this is a really great region to image in narrow band. So if you're like me and you haven't yet gone over to mono, which is something that I hope to do in the very near future, you can use a dual narrowband filter in this area. And that way on nights like tonight, whenever the moon is very bright, you can still image and get a lot of excellent usable data. So dual narrowband filters are becoming more and more popular. I know that several new models have been released within the last 6 months. I know the, what are they called? The Magic. Here, let me look them up real quick. Okay, so that's Askar's Color Magic narrowband filters. They're pricier, but man, I've heard really good things about these. So they have them for oxygen, hydrogen, and sulfur, and I think they might be coming out with some others as well, but those are narrowband filters that you can buy individually, or obviously you can get the dual narrowband in one, like my L-Extreme F2 filter that I love so much. They're not cheap filters, but they are certainly worth the money if you want to be able to image, any time of the month, whether the moon's out or not. It is definitely worth making an investment in, particularly if you're in that, Satyr region and you want to be able to, get a lot of really cool usable nebulosity when the full moon's out. That's an excellent, excellent way to make that happen. All right, so why don't we talk about recommendations this week? So I realized last week I did not include my regular weekly recommendation. I felt awful, but I've got a very, very good one for you this week. So I hope that makes up for it. So as you all know, I'm a bit of an Audible junkie. I love the service. I think it's well worth the money. I'm always listening to an audiobook, I just feel like my brain can't really relax. It has to be absorbing something at all times. That might be a psychological issue, but I like to think that I just enjoy books. So, as you also may know, if you're a longtime listener of the show, I'm a big Stephen King fan. And he actually recently came out with a new book. It's actually a collection of his short stories, which if you've never read a King short story, I guess before I read them, I kind of thought to myself, who wants to read short stories? But one of these quote unquote short stories is nearly 8 hours long. So very, very good stories, regardless of the length. Some of them are shorter. Some of them are very long. They're all really good. Some are heads and shoulders better than the others. There's no doubt about that, but I haven't heard a single one that I was like, that was bad. So definitely recommend that. The book is called You Like It Darker. And if you're a big King fan, he actually revisits some of the places. And if you know King, places are almost characters in his books. In fact, I won't spoil anything, but one of the places is one of the books. And he actually revisits some really important characters from some of his older work. So definitely highly recommend you give that a listen. I can tell you my favorite of the books so far. Well, I'm not going to say it's my favorite, but the one that stood out to me the most was the story with Grandpa. So I'll just leave it at that. If you get a chance to listen to it, definitely do that. I actually also discovered a second book this week, and I'm going to use the term book very loosely because it's more of a, I don't know. I'm sure that there's a particular phrase that is used for this particular genre, but basically like an audio novella might be the right way to describe this. So I found an audiobook on Audible that looked really interesting, and I always read a lot of reviews before I actually purchase one. And while reading the reviews, I stumbled across a comment, and it said, "Just so you know, this entire book is on Sound Booth Theater, and they have a whole cast of characters voicing each, or cast of actors rather, voicing each of the characters in the book." And I was like, that sounds interesting. So I went and downloaded Sound Booth Theater, and the book is called Dungeon Crawler Carl. And I'll give you that this book is really probably not for everyone, but if you enjoy RPG games at any point in your life, think Final Fantasy, literally any dungeon crawler type game, just RPGs in general, then you're going to completely get this book. And the voice acting is so phenomenal. So they got the main character from the original audiobook who did the voice of Carl. And then apparently they added on a bunch of other voices for all of the, supplemental characters. And I've just really, really enjoyed this so far, which kind of surprised me because I thought it sounded a little bit corny, the premise, like an RPG book, but I was kind of shocked at how much I've enjoyed it thus far. So I highly, highly recommend you check that out. Another cool thing about it is the first chapter, if you will, I guess season 1, episode 1 is what they call it, of the book is actually free. So if you download Sound Booth Theater, you can actually get Dungeon Crawler Carl episode 1 for free. And it's like 3 hours long. So you'll definitely get a feel for whether or not you like it. I will tell you, give it about, an hour and a half, because that's when it really opens up. There's a particular point, I won't spoil it, in the first episode where I was literally laughing out loud. And that's kind of when the whole book clicked for me. And I was like, okay, I love this. So give it a little bit of a chance, and let me know if you like it. Also, I've got kind of big news on the website front for the Astrocast. I've actually relaunched my photography website, which is qcroo.com. That's Q like Queen, C like City. Charlotte is the Queen City. It's what we call it here. So qcroo, that's ROO.com. I've relaunched it. I'm in the process of rebuilding it currently. I didn't particularly like the way I had it set up before. It was just kind of all over the place, and it had a lot of my really old photos on there. And I've gotten a lot better since I put those photos up. So I decided to go ahead and start rebuilding the site. And if you want to go check that out, feel free to. The plan is to eventually start putting prints up on the site that I can sell. So if anyone would ever be interested in getting a copy of one of the prints, stay tuned for that as well. Also, I mentioned this last week, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it again. Our Patreon members Discord is going quite well. We have a good chat going along in there. Lots of astrophotography photos have already been shared, and it is just 3 of us in there right now. We do have 4 members on the Patreon, so I don't know why the other 2 haven't jumped in yet, but I'm sure they will when they're ready. And I'm just looking to get probably 5 people in the Discord before we kind of have our first virtual star party one night. So if that's something that you would be interested in, please feel free to check out patreon.com/the Astrocast. If you donate at even $1 per month, you'll get access to the members only Discord. And that just goes towards the cost of running the show, because again, it's a one-man show. I do everything by myself and pay for the hosting, blah, blah, blah. I don't mind doing it at all, but any support that I can get is always certainly welcome. And then finally, one other big announcement. I've been wrestling with this for quite some time, and I finally came to the decision recently that I am going to be doing a video version of the podcast. It's going to be in the coming weeks. I'm in the process of getting a little bit of equipment that I needed. I need some lighting basically for lighting is really important if you're doing videos. You may or may not know that, but well, chances are you do. If you listen to this podcast, you probably are smart enough to realize how important lights are for videos. So I apologize, but yeah, I needed to get some lights that would work well. I've already got cameras, obviously, that I can use to record the videos. And it's not going to impact the audio version of the podcast at all. We will still obviously have this show be a audio only podcast for anybody who wants to listen to it that way. But I just thought it would be cool to also do a video version. So, if I'm talking about a particular nebula or galaxy or piece of equipment, I could show photos of it while I'm, kind of discussing that particular thing of interest. So look forward to that. That'll probably be, within the next, I hope, 2 or 3 episodes. I'm hoping I can do. I will have to see how much time this adds to the production of each episode. I don't suspect it's going to be that much of a time sink compared to what I already do for each episode. These are, generally hour-long episodes that I do once a week. If it ends up being very time consuming, it might be like a every other week sort of thing. I haven't decided yet. I got to feel it out and see how it goes, but stay tuned for that. Something to certainly be excited about. So, the website, qcroo.com launching. We have the Patreon Discord going, and videos are on the horizon. So a lot of really cool stuff happening around the Astrocast, and I'm just really excited to share that with you guys. And can't wait to continue to see how this story unfolds. So with all that being said, it's about 10 o'clock right now it's actually Tuesday night. So I came back. I don't know if you know this or not, but I got invited to record at one of my favorite podcasts called the Backyard Naturalists. And it was kind of a last minute thing. They had told me after I photographed that event over last weekend that they'd like to have me on the show at some point. And she actually had a slot open up short notice. So I jumped at the opportunity because you don't know when opportunities like that are going to come up. So I went down there tonight. I recorded a great interview with Lori and Debbie, host of the Backyard Naturalists. And that episode will probably be coming out in the next few weeks, and I'd love for you guys to listen to it. Obviously, I'll post a link to it whenever that does come out. And if you haven't already, you can find the Astrocast on Facebook. And then obviously feel free to email me. That's rooastrocast@gmail.com. And now that I have my website relaunched, you can actually email me at roo@qcroo.com. If that is important to you. Just figured I'd share it with you guys because it is going to be a kind of a placeholder for the show as well. So I think that's going to just about do it for us this week, guys. I greatly appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with us for an hour and talking about the stars. You have been listening to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Roo. I hope you have a wonderful week. The moon isn't coming up until midnight, and it's going to be later and later. Don't forget, after the full moon passes, the moon starts rising later and later at night. You don't have to wait till new moon to get out there and image. We got till midnight. That's a few hours. We can go outside and image before the moon comes up. So take advantage of those times while you can. And this is one of those nights where I hope to do just that. So I will catch you guys next week. Thanks so much. I'm your host, Roo. You've been listening to the Astrocast. Clear skies.